Well, I think we can get started. So just welcome everybody here. This is the first sort of series that we're doing called the SAS Speaker Series. I'm so honored and excited that we have Mike Ladman here, who I was trying to think about what year we met. When I started Score in 2010, I was 23, and we're about the same age.
Yeah.
And you were like fresh at McCann.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, were you an intern there?
I had interned in summer of 08 and then did finish school and then had an internship at a small music supervision shop, and then just was waiting for McCann to call me back, and they called me back full time. Would be January of 2010. So yeah, I was 22, 23. So it's
And for those that don't know, McCann is probably one of the most legendary ad agencies in the world. Like, I mean, probably started, I don't know, 300 years ago. I mean, it's like literally been around since the way beginning of the industry.
Yeah, Mad. It was funny because when I first starting, in those first couple of years, the show Mad Men came out, and McCann is featured quite a bit in the beginning and then more at the end. And in the beginning is more from a kind of a disgruntled McCanner's point of view, who's a writer on the show. So there's a lot of heat thrown at McCann that the agency felt the need to respond to publicly, given the harsh words. But yeah, so I went from essentially the old legendary iconic agency to Droga, the new cool kid, kind of hot agency for the past 14 years now. Is how long Droga's been around, I think, somewhere around there. Maybe more actually, but yeah. And I've been at Droga now. I just hit 7 years, end of June, which is wild. So just shy of 7 at McCann and just over 7 at Droga.
That's awesome. So most of what you learned in the advertising space was all just by doing. I mean, you had no formal training in music or advertising getting into McCann at that time?
For that, no formal, no. It was interesting. I grew up playing guitar and wanting to be the rock star, and was not going to go to college, and just thought about, selling out the garden until the band broke up. And from Jersey, where I'm from, I ended up at University of Delaware just because, and I worked at a record store for like 30, 40 hours a week for 3 years. Like most communications majors have a lot of free time. So that I would say was my education, and being on campus while there was illegal torrent sites like Oink, What, and Waffles for any super nerds out there. Essentially, before streaming services, it was these invite-only, highly curated, downloadable things where I could download any song in the world on campus speed and had like a crazy leech to whatever ratio. But no formal training. I don't think most people we're like the last of a generation where we fell into this. I have a junior music supervisor now, and I often speak at different schools where there's classes for music supervision and things like that. So I fell into it. I was on an interview for an internship to be a copywriter at McCann, and I only knew of advertising from my older stepsister from being an art director. And that interview's like, we really love you, but like you have no portfolio or writing experience. Why don't you do this music supervisor thing with our EP and pick and produce music for commercials? And then, trial by fire, just kind of like found a productive, useful outlet for this encyclopedic music knowledge I've amassed my whole life.
Well, what's interesting is you're right. Like today you can take a course or even like maybe a degree, some schools of music supervision, which just did not exist 15 years ago.
Which is wild.
So what's your favorite part of the job today, now that you're sort of running music at a big ad agency, Droga5, which really is known for being one of the most creative and I would say most respected agencies right now? What's your favorite aspect?
I think what's fun is that it always changes. I think any career or job does as you move up and get experience. So for so long, it was literally just lock me in a room, don't email me, don't talk to me. I'm just going to look at film and give you the best music in the world for that film. Stuff that is unexpected and helps elevate. I think that is still a lot that lights me up, but in that version of the career and time, I never even cared about negotiating, getting the deals or things like that. I think now I love that still, that there is no throw quite like that. But now I think pushing people towards different music, I think my definition of a music supervisor has changed, where as opposed to the track having to be one that I pitched, just ensuring that the best track from whether it's Mara, my junior, or account creative, whatever the best track I think for the spot, making sure that goes final. And so with that pursuit, I think there's a lot of negotiations and just pushing people to agree on that, because it's a gauntlet of approvals. So I think just kind of planting that seed, and how do you get the best creative idea pushed forward, and then now doing this so long, our relationships, like getting that done and moving all those pieces, is kind of what excites me. So maybe similar, different, but just pushing from a different angle. Maybe.
That's cool. I mean, can you talk us like maybe even through a specific project if you want, but just how is the song actually selected right now? Like if you're going to get a brief today, like what's going to be the process kind of from that point on?
Yeah, so I will always answer the brief and go with my gut and what excites me. So it's almost intimidating how great everyone at Droga is, their taste, their desire to push the boundaries, and the history of amazing work we've done, that it's tough to keep topping ourselves and one-upping ourselves for New York Times or Meta or whoever it might be. So if I have a clear brief, sometimes it'll answer the script exactly, what they're looking for. And so I will send tracks based off that brief, whether that's a lyrical brief or an instrumental brief or whatever it is. But just doing music and listening to probably more music than most humans on earth at this point, of just putting in the reps of years and time doing it, I have a different knowledge. So I think the things that people think of, maybe are a little bit more obvious. So taking that idea and then figuring out what's a less familiar way to maybe achieve the feeling of the brief rather than just the words. So, something cool, swagger, or whatever, those kind of words, if you put that with a beer commercial or a car commercial, we've seen that. And swagger can be trap, it could be blues, it could be a bunch of things. So I'm always, my little formula for the feels, I say, which is what we're looking for, is like when you get the goosebumps from a spot. It's kind of three parts. So one, is the song good? I think we have all heard ads, seen things where it's like, it says the words are right, the energy is right, it's doing it, but it's just not really a good song. It just kind of doesn't have soul. So, or that human quality they want to actually listen. So first, like, is the thing good? Do you want to playlist it? And that obviously there is some subjectivity to that. Second is like, is it telling the story? And so, if it's a lyric song, are those words telling you the story? Ideally not too cliche. If it's an instrumental, then is it enhancing the emotion with the spot and adding the pace and the emotion where appropriate? And the third, to get to the feels, which I think when you do this part, the selection becomes much easier, because you get the goosebumps. It's usually pretty unanimous when you have the magic, is can you do both of those things in an unexpected way? So how do you get that feeling of swagger and confidence without a trap beat, without a distorted guitar? And if you can do that, I think the selection is much easier. But essentially it comes from me and my team, my junior. We'll send a first round, creatives will choose their selects, maybe they'll be, hey, we love this. We like this other direction you showed us. Let's explore that further. We'll send more options. Then we get the cut. Actually, no, nothing works. Like the film is totally different on set. There was clouds and there was all these other things that happened. Talent didn't perform, or maybe the other way. It's just we found something different, and then we pivot as needed. And it gets through us first, and we pitch and voice what we think is the best for the spot and why to our creatives. There's a hierarchy of creatives from junior, mid to senior ECD, and then from there we go to client with our 1 to 3 favorite tracks, and then clients have another hierarchy. And what's great about Droga is that creatives and account and production will all fight and be very tactical about how we present music to ensure that the song that we like the most goes on air. And sometimes we know the thing that'll work for a client, but it's just maybe not, again, that interesting, unexpected thing. So we kind of work to lead them to the water. I think it's a lot of inception of having them often think the great idea was theirs, maybe present it once and then save it, and then 5 rounds later put it back in so it's familiar, put it in a different spot, do a different edit of it, send it in playlists for other things. But yeah,
every time I hear about this process, I'm just reminded that it's basically a miracle every time we get a license, because of how many people have to give a thumbs up. Like, how many would you estimate are in that process, from accounts to producers to creatives to the client?
Yeah, it could be different. I mean, sometimes there are those ones where the client does just kind of trust us usually, the sugarfish, trust me, the Nizawa or whatever, but like it is rare. And same thing with creatives. There are those times where I've have relationships where we've gone for so long where, they won't even share their thoughts until they hear what I think is best. But it is wild how you could go we've had those things where it's approved on a Thursday, Friday before the weekend, the CEO, CMO of the brand is like, I didn't see this, and no, I don't like this, or my nephew loves whatever the thing is, and let's just go get that. And it's like, wait, what? We had, $2,000 and now there's $1 million for some pop star. Yeah, so I never believe it until it's on air.
And what about the timeline from all this? Like, I mean, sometimes you're at the luxury of, you can take a long time to do this. Maybe you're starting the music search before you've even shot the spot. And then there's other times where they need something right away, right? So how much does that change your approach from a strategy standpoint?
Yeah, it's not necessarily always one is better than the other. I think with music, you can have that song that you've been working on for years and it's amazing, or you can have a 1-hour challenge, and that lack of ability to have perfectionism or just to make quick decisions sometimes gets you more interesting results. So I have sometimes those band-aid spots, as I call them, are almost more fun, because sometimes you can overthink something and forget your North Star after, usually after round, like you really like 6 or 7, it's like typically the best stuff is in there. But sometimes if it gets to crazy town when you're on round 12 or 13, it's kind of like, I don't fucking know. I've sent every song, and then you just throw weird stuff that like isn't quite on, that then does maybe open up some new avenue or unlock some magic that overthinking for the perfect song, you might not have arrived at that decision. So often it is like, the first gut track, I hear a brief, I see film, and like a song pops in my head. Usually that is like often I feel like the best in those first 5 tracks of a search, but there are times when it is in round 13 or 14 where that insight from just kind of deep down can come.
Well, aside from working with music partners like Score or others, like, what is your process of finding those hidden gems of music right now? Like, where do you find inspiration? Where do you find that you're just listening to songs that people aren't?
Yeah, I think it's like, if everyone goes to the Gap, we're all going to look the same. So all music supervisors are pretty much getting the same mailers from all the labels and publishers. So I certainly do go through those, because it does curate a lot, but I try to find other ways. So also doing this 14 years, I think I've publicly and vocally made my tastes and just what I like, but still being a total music nerd and fan, known that people who have worked with a lot will be like, hey, I just got this and I know you'll love it. Like those specific things, they'll send stuff specific to, I think, my tastes. I like to follow Bandcamp is great. I find all these labels from around the world doing these reissues and other things that sometimes I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if I should pitch this because I'm not sure how clearable it is.
Right.
But I follow that and get blips, and so that'll find me some other roads. And then I started to kind of answer that question. I started a playlist. I used to do a monthly playlist for Droga, which then led to me just doing a weekly thing for the past 2.5 years of 10 eclectic tracks each week. And it's sort of, I now have all these different playlists of people that I find. I'll find some, Ethiopian disco track, and then maybe not know where I found it, but then see who's the label that put it out, And then if it's, has 1,000 streams, who else put this on a playlist and liked it? And then check out that. And if it's an overall interesting playlist, follow that person. So I have a series of playlists. There are trusted labels like Light in the Attic and Numero Group and Analog Africa.
By the way, I've been getting your weekly playlist for 2.5 years and they're awesome. So for anybody listening, where can they find that? How do they sign up for it? Maybe we can figure out a link.
Yeah, we could drop the link in the chat. It's Ladman Music Discovery, and I add the date when it's updated. There's a text thing you can subscribe to. I'm going to turn it into a newsletter, but if you just follow the playlist and check every week, it'll be updated.
Perfect. I just got it. I'm going to make sure. I don't know if everybody can see that or not. So here, I'm going to send it here.
But everything, at least for the past year and a half or two, that's added is pretty much when it's added, it's under 1 million streams. And it's like, again, it's forcing me to find things. There's certain things where you can tell it's like a weird nugget that the algorithm is just kind of given everyone. So
for sure. I know it's super cool. Thank you. And I'm glad we could share it out. So I'm thinking about a lot of the people on here are composers that, probably their dream is to be working on a campaign with you, doing something custom. And you can't just like wait around for those things. And I think what's interesting about Droga is you have the opportunity to work with whoever you want. And I know that like composers doing other things, not just add music, is super exciting to the creatives at Droga. Can you just speak a little bit about how, I know you've worked with like insane people, like dreamy Johnny Greenwood collaborations from Radiohead, which I don't know how you get to do that. But like, I would say for people that aren't Johnny Greenwood, maybe they don't have a commercial, band that's that big. Do you still see the opportunity to like work on interesting documentaries, work on interesting other long form projects that can kind of elevate the brand to get the attention of advertising on the back end?
100%. That's often what we try to do. So there's a lot of creators out there. So there's you guys, there's music houses. I think that's a great way to do it. So if someone just wants to be a composer, that's great and go right there. But I think there's always references, we want something that sounds like jungle or sounds like, Tame Impala, whatever it might be. Usually there's a reference, whether that's a film, TV show, or ad. And so we go, to get bespoke stuff done in that world or just to score. But Droga, and I think most people, let's just go to the source. Like, because we're rarely going for the A-list or that sort of thing. We'll just go right to the artists. And so again, some of these artists might be bigger than just someone at home listening in. Even an indie band playing Webster Hall is probably still some moderate level of success and notoriety, but we'll try to go to those bands direct instead of having someone else go to them, or maybe it's just the guitarist or who else is in that world of that band. So if it's not LCD Sound System, who else in that world, and can we get an artist like that to do it? So if someone's in a band, I think it's more of or artists first. It's almost more interesting what they'll likely come up with. It's like, excuse me, Tarantino's the director, but like, what's his take on a Western? What's his take? And so if you have someone in a band, it's like, well, they're really one of our best, this guy we use a lot, Phil K. We always go to him for orchestral. His background is actually hip hop and electronic. And because of that, his orchestral work is interesting and has actually like a pop hook in there hidden. So instead of it just gives it a different melody and hook than someone who went to school for classical doing classical. So I think it would be, just start doing it. I think there probably a lot of creators could be just producers, but if you're specifically a composer, want to do it for picture, like just do it. Find commercials and just rip the audio and do what makes it interesting for me. Start noticing that, listening to soundtracks of movies that you do like. But we do work often with companies or through companies to get to the individual writer, whether that's through you or a music house. And that's so that we get a little bit more bang for our buck, and B, there's insurance and things involved, and there is a bit of a learning curve. So if you don't have that reel, it's such a catch-22, right? Because you want to do it, but people want to work with people of experience, so it's a little tricky to get those first couple shots. But I know, and I've recommended composers and friends and artists to work with music companies that make bespoke music. I could just be sharing their artist projects or things like that. Like, okay, cool, their production is great for this, and then they'll fire, okay, 80s pop brief, let's call this guy. Or if we need crazy string trap for some reason, like we'll call this girl over here who does that. So even if you don't have that experience, I think it's good to have some length of noise that you've created, and might as well just rip audio, just put it to film, and just make sure you're clear in saying, like, I did this on my own, because I have seen people misrepresenting posting McDonald's and work that I've done with other music, and that's not really cool.
No, definitely don't do that. But
You won that gauntlet of approvals, and there's a reason the music that went to air probably happened. So although there could be something better out there, why did they do that? There's reasons and personalities and things to get there. So make sure you're representing that correctly. So I did that kind of answer.
I think so. I mean, I'm also just curious on the flip side of that, like, what are the more challenging aspects of working directly with a composer on a custom job? Versus like you going into your playlist and being like, this is a song that exists, I can sell it through, it's from 1960, I just have to like Facebook message like the guy's uncle who owns the estate now and get it cleared, like,
which happens.
Yeah.
I remember before buying a blue check, I was like telling my PR team, can I use a Droga account, or can you please get me a blue check so I can get these labels and people to respond to me quicker when I'm trying to DM to try to find rights holders. So much is about the creative. There's times that I've had those $1 million budgets and I'm like, honestly, stock music, like just go with a library track, because you just want a trope, and like it's not needed. You're going to make a lot more problems. And so the same thing can happen when there's an old track, or on Accenture, we've done, I think there's a brief where they're often about innovation and technology and change. And so we've mined all the known songs about that. And the big ones have been overused, and the smaller ones are interesting, but maybe like, why would you take an old 60s track? It's not modern, that no one knows, although the words are right. Let's just kind of create one. Or we've done modern covers of it. So it's like, again, how do we get the best result? So we could throw the nugget on, but no one knows it anyway, and it sounds a little dated. We've had Wet Leg cover Blondie. We had Fote and Madison McFerrin cover an old Johnny Mercer track that people knew because we love the Johnny Mercer track. It was like medium known, but the structure didn't fit our spot. So let's just get someone great to recreate it. So the difficulties might be that people are used to working with companies where for demos we'll get 5 to 12 tracks. If you go with composer, you're just stuck with one, and
right.
Kind of a mental game to get everyone on that boat, because they're just used to that. Although you only shoot with one director, have one person score, unless it is like that Johnny Green. Even then, whether it's Yonzi or whoever it may be, there's still commitment issues with music partners for some reason. So it's how to navigate and go in with that person with confidence and maybe some other ideas before there.
So the big thing right now everywhere is AI, right? Like everybody is curious about what's going to happen. And I'm just curious, are you currently using any sort of AI in your day-to-day job? And where do you see it going for the industry?
I think it's a tool. I think it's, auto-tune didn't stop singers. Melodyne didn't stop people from singing. People like James Blake were probably the first to take it, even though they could sing, and make something more interesting. So I think you can have a great artist who maybe doesn't have, you listen to like Nick Cave or Bjork or Radiohead, and it sounds expensive. It's like, oh, well, it's not a patch. They just got a full orchestra and choir. And I think AI can help bring those larger arrangements to people who don't have those budgets or know-how. So from a strictly creator point, I think it's another idea starter. It's a way of using Jeff Tweedy's ways of pulling words in a room, the ChatGPT maybe find different word combinations. But the same way as copying and pasting from Wikipedia is kind of plagiarizing and uninteresting and not you. I think music will, from the creation side, have that same thing. It's like, you heard 3 songs, how does that impact your writing? You have this thing, how do you put your spin on it? Kind of like that Tarantino iteration of something. For us, we're very much, I think, almost every creative deck has something for AI. I think the tricky thing is the legal behind it. So lawyers and BA are often, from agency side as well as labels, are right now a little scared and trying to figure out how to make a version that will be usable in a public commercial space. I think people are just gonna start using it, and I think they're gonna just do something great and not think about that. They're just gonna, like kids always do, create because it's good, and then hopefully it just doesn't turn into Napster, where I guess they sort of did with that Drake thing already, where they sue the customers. Like, I just don't think going after your fan base is the best way to do it. Grind is embracing, cool. The Drake thing, like Drake was like, all right, cool. There was, so someone, I'm assuming everyone knows, but like AI made a Drake song essentially, and they're like, it's not bad, it's not great, but it's like not bad. And if that's your level of good, I think then cool. Like, I think a machine can make a Big Mac. Is it going to go make John George, amazing piece of fish or some crazy burger like that? I don't think so. So there'll be room for that there, and I think room for the real artists and perspective to come from elsewhere. I think, Audio Shake is kind of AI based to some degree, and that's been great. Audio Shake is a company now. There's just plugins and things that you can essentially make stems from music. So you can pull out the vocals, which is actually, I just heard, developed from actual radar for topography of the ocean. And from using that, if you look at the audio waves, you can pull out like, oh, here's the vocal in this frequency, which is kind of wild for, again,
Unbelievable.
something and using it for something else. That's probably more, well, at least for this chat, a more interesting use.
Yeah, I mean, well, every question today was from ChatGPT. So no, I'm just kidding.
I'm not surprised. I mean, there was that South Park from ChatGPT. It's like, yeah, I mean, if you type this in, would it have, we chatted it before, would it have asked them in the right way and interacted in this?
Yeah.
And it's a tool. I have to figure out some questions for this. Here's a starting point. It's Spark Notes, but it's not the same. So I think you're going to keep seeing more, because it's like, being the first man on the move, a high five for that guy, the first high five, everything is a first. And that's a great headline for any agency, for anything, to be the first at anything. It's a quick way to press. So yeah, I don't know, anytime, whether it's emotions or anything you're scared of, there's probably something to dig deeper into. And so it's happening. So it kind of, opinion doesn't matter. Just try to figure out how to embrace and utilize it. Because I know when we're briefing people, they could be using it and we don't know really, so
no, it's just a matter of how we use it. And I don't think it's a matter of how we fight it. I agree with you. It's how we embrace it. And they are tools for sure. And of course there are aspects that feel threatening, when you hear what AI tools could do to, mimic a lot of composers, and then the copyright potential infringements, but nobody really owns a copyright. It's just fascinating stuff. But unfortunately, we are out of time. And I just want to say this was so awesome and fun. I feel like we could talk so much longer, and often do, over lunch. But this is great, man. Thank you so much for joining us to kick this off. I'm actually going to drop a link for anybody who missed it, but just sign up here if you want to be aware of future sort of, I think this is going to be an ongoing thing if people like it, just to kind of give insight into industry experts. And Mike, you're the legend, the man. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, because there certainly are some things where we can have a great conversation, but I think, yeah, I mean, you built Score. I mean, mass, it's wild. You're one dude. How big is your team now?
We're about 20 people now.
Yeah, and how many songs? The roster from merit of work, and there's hustling, and there's cold calling, and there's relationships, and the way in which you've navigated and built this like universally beloved empire, because you're wonderful as a human and business. Everyone just wants to be a part of that train and experience. It's awesome. So
thanks, man.
It's an honor to be the first one for this, and hopefully people enjoyed it and will continue to tune in, because you're the proof. So
thank you so much. Well, have a beautiful rest of your day, everybody. And we'll be talking soon. Thanks, Mike.